Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Teacher Development Webinar. My name is Amanullah Sand. I facilitate virtual programs at Teacher Development Webinars. Teacher Development Webinars is a social action project implemented by British Council Active Citizens in Pakistan as a response to COVID-19 crisis. It is an initiative to support teachers and educators around the world with professional development opportunities. We are thankful to Master English Training for sponsoring a Zoom account. And today we honor and pay a tribute to Army Public School martyrs. On December 16, 2014, 6 terrorists associated with banned outfit conducted the attack on Army Public School. As a result of this, the deadliest attack in the history of Pakistan, 132 innocent students were martyred, and this included 17 staff members too. We pray for their families and pay a tribute to APS martyrs. And for today's webinar, we'll present a catalog of sorts looking at myriad options and opportunities that are available for teachers who want to take their skills and their careers further. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Christopher Walker for this webinar. Christopher Walker is a teacher, teacher trainer, and writer based in south of Poland. He has master's degree in applied linguistics and TESOL, and he has worked in EFL for close to 15 years. He can be found online at closellyobserved.com. Thank you very much for being with us today, Christopher. Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoy all of these sort of conferences and the opportunity to meet new people and to experience things from further abroad than just my normal experiences here in Poland. Now, as we're all going through this difficult time of the pandemic, a lot of us are finding that our opportunities for travel and adventure are very limited. That's certainly the case here, where travel anywhere is close to forbidden. There's always a risk that if you go somewhere, you might not be able to get back again. So I feel like my existence is restricted almost just to this room, the room just here. And I love the fact that I'm able to be in the presence of people from around the world right now. It really is fantastic. So to those of you who are just joining us here, like some of you have done, please say hello in the chat. Say where you're from. We've got a guy from Palestine, someone from Algeria. This is brilliant. Wow, countries that I haven't visited yet, but I'd love to in the future.
We'll see, we have such a diverse audience.
Yeah, I love that sort of diversity. The danger that you have as a teacher is that you start to think that the way that you present the language is the way the language works and the way that it is used. But as I saw on my master's, yeah, we've got Nepal, we've got Vietnam. It's brilliant. Vietnam I've been to, actually. I have been to Vietnam and I loved every minute I was there. A wonderful country full of wonderful people. I'm sure that's true of most places, actually, when you look past what the newspapers present. But what I was thinking was that one of the things that I covered on my master's course was the idea of the expanding circle, and this idea that English, as a lot of people conceptualize it, is not so much the language spoken by people in the country of England. Most of my students here in Poland have no desire or no ambitions to go to England and to start speaking to people there. That's not why they learn English. They learn English because it is the lingua franca of today, just like French was before, and just like Latin or Greek were centuries ago. English is the lingua franca. So yes, Amanullah, if you could allow me to share the screen, I shall start my presentation.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
I think you have to enable it for me.
Well, I think you are co-host, so you can do it.
Afraid not, no. If you look at the share screen thing at the bottom, the green little button, there should be a little arrow next to it.
Yes, now you can do it.
There we go. Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. So yes, welcome to you all. Very nice to see you all. Some of you have written in the chat to send their greetings. It's great to see that the Zoom etiquette is being followed by so many already. I guess we're all well trained in the way that Zoom works now, aren't we? And when you enter a webinar or a conference, you turn off the camera, you turn off the microphone, and you are there. The problem I find is that some of my own students are a little bit too well trained in this regard. And what happens is they don't turn on the cameras and don't turn on the microphones. And I find that it can be a little bit demoralizing as a teacher to be teaching like I do sometimes for 90 minutes to what is effectively a black wall. So I always encourage people to use the chat. It is a non-invasive means of communication here on Zoom, and it works very well. In fact, with the class that I'm talking about, and I'll return to this class later when we look at one of the aspects in this teacher development catalog, I get most of my communication from them through the chat. They're very sensitive 12, 13 and 14-year-olds. They arrive at my lessons after a great many of their own school lessons, and they don't seem still to have the energy with which to engage in our classes. But they have to come because their parents sign them up for the course, so they have little choice. But they don't seem to really want to be there in any great way. We try to liven things up with games and everything like that. But if you're not in the right mind frame for a lesson, it's very difficult to do very much. But as I said, I'll be coming back to them later. Today in this teacher development webinar, I would like to talk about some of the options available to you so that you can develop as a teacher. A lot of this will be familiar to many of you, but I'm hoping that there will be little gaps, areas that maybe you haven't considered before and that you might start to think would make for a next step for yourselves. The first area that I want to talk about is reading. Reading is something that I really love and cherish. You can see the bookcase over to my side there is completely packed with books. Most of it is not related to the craft of teaching, but some of these books are. A book that I read recently was this, a book that was first published 35 years ago called The English Verb. And it's very, very good. If you ever get a chance to read this or anything else by Michael Lewis, the author, I really recommend it. Even after 15 years, I'm still finding things that surprise and delight me and that I can take into the classroom to add value to what I'm doing with my students. So in terms of reading then, what the first place to start, of course, would be to choose a topic that interests you. Whenever you embark on a new course of development, you need to think, is this going to be enough to sustain my interest for the next however many days, weeks, or months? If it's not an area that particularly interests you, you might find that it's hard to maintain your enthusiasm and to keep up your work ethic. So, for example, though it's a bit of a weakness of mine anyway, I'm not enormously fond of pronunciation. I know how important it is, but I find that reading about pronunciation is a little bit dry. There are no surprises. We know how pronunciation works. It's all biological and quite mechanical. So as much as I've tried, I still don't know the phonetic alphabet completely perfectly. I try to learn it, but like learning Japanese hiragana and katakana, I learn as much as I can, and then a week passes and I come back and I've forgotten pretty much everything. So you need to choose a topic that really interests you. For me, anything to do with writing interests me, and I quite like English grammar because I think that it is an area that's still ripe for investigation. To do this reading, you should read as widely as possible. Google Scholar is a great place to find open access articles, or at least PDF versions of articles that would otherwise be locked behind a paywall. And I think it's very important that we read from as many sources as possible. The best way to learn something, as you know yourself, so you teach. When you teach your students, you don't present an idea to them once and then move on. If you're teaching vocabulary, you don't present vocabulary to them once and then move on. You return again and again. You take the central concept and you approach it from different angles. The same really is true when you're reading and reading for your personal development. You need to read as many sources as possible because different writers perceive things differently, for one thing. Different writers argue, that's another thing. But for your own benefit, simply repeated exposure is massively important. By going back to the same thing time and time again, you'll start to feel it absorbing into who you are as a teacher, and it starts to infect your practice in a good way. I also think it's very important to keep a journal to document your reading. Now, I've not always done this myself, and I rather regret it. I now keep something of a journal to document all of my reading, not just teaching related, but literature. So, for example, I've created a Goodreads account. So every time I finish reading a book, I will write a review of the book and I'll try to go in as much detail as possible. And then later I revisit those reviews to see how much I still remember about the book. What I do now with my EFL reading is that I make notes along the way. So for example, I showed you this book that I've just finished reading, and these are my notes. So as you can see, as I was going through, I made quite a lot of notes. I could have made more, actually, but then I thought, well, if I make a note of everything that's interesting, I'll end up just copying the whole book. Sometimes you find a book like that. Everything seems to be a nugget of really valuable information. So keeping a journal to document your reading is really useful. And if you need the additional help presented by a community, form a reading circle at your school or online. And at that point, I would like to just take a quick break and share the screen with some different areas that you can get your reading from. So these will be different websites where you can go to read. And I also want to invite you to an online reading circle. So the first website that I'd like to share with you, and all of these links will be made available later for you as well, so you'll be able to click and go. The first website is written by a friend of mine, Sandy Millen. She's been in EFL for quite a long time, just like I have myself. She's very experienced and very knowledgeable. She also reads a lot and she writes a lot. So this is a very approachable blog full of very interesting practical ideas, things that you can use as you do your lessons. So for example, in a recent blog post, she talked about the days of the week, and she has a nice ELT song embedded in just here, but she goes into enough detail that you feel that you could take that idea and go a little bit further. So she has a nice long blog, lots of interesting ideas there. And I think that this is a great place to start if you want to have a general idea of what to do in some of your lessons. Quick and easy is the key. If, however, you want something a little bit meatier to bite into, then I recommend the blog of Philip Kerr. And Philip Kerr is somebody who's been in EFL or ELT for a long, long time. He's got lots of publications next to his name. And he has this website, Adaptive Learning in ELT, which focuses on this idea of adaptive learning. He has a free, a short book that he offers through the website that tells you all about what adaptive learning is. But I've used his website quite a lot, and I really like it for the simple reason that he has references. He's a kind of academic writer, but he's making blog posts that are really readable. So for example, here in this article, he starts talking about virtual reality, the next big thing in ELT. But as well as talking about his own feelings towards virtual reality and the virtual reality experience, he also references other people's work. So you have links throughout the document, but at the end, he has his references, and a lot of the time, these will link directly to a PDF version of the paper so that you can then follow up on his reading. So I like this a lot because it gives you a great idea to start with. It helps spin you off in different directions. If you don't have a lot of time, you can read his blog post and you'll get a lot of the core information. But if it is a topic that truly interests you, you can then follow all the references and start finding out about all of these other papers that have been written. The next place to talk about, if we're looking at reading, would actually be the International House Journal. This is a free paper that is put out every couple of months by International House. If we look at the issues, you can read the present issue. You just click on the link just here, and you can read all of it online. There's Sandy Millen, who I mentioned a few moments ago. She has a few papers out at the moment about teaching online and adjusting to the online world. Lots of papers written by people from all around the IH network. So it is a bit of a walled garden in a way. You have to be within IH to read this, but this is open access. This is great. There are lots and lots of issues, and you can start going back through them. We have years and years worth of material going back a long, long way. And there is a lot of really good stuff in there. I was reading something ironically about pronunciation just the other day, and it did inform my teaching. So I'm glad that I took a look at that. The next one I would like to show you is another kind of journal, which is Humanising Language Teaching. And this is put out by the Pilgrims organization based in the UK. There are some people here involved in the journal that have been around in ELT for a long time, people who have written course books, people like Mario Rimvalucri, who you might have heard of, and Rod Bolitho, who I referenced in my master's work, actually. Adrian Underhill has been a contributor here. So there are a lot of the leading figures in ELT and EFL who have contributed here. You can go to the current edition and you see it broken down by section. There's a little something here by myself, which I encourage you to read because, of course, it's a very interesting article and beautifully well written. Well, no, maybe not, but it certainly gives you some idea of what you can do to make your online lessons more successful if you still feel you need that sort of thing. So I like HLT. I think it's a really good journal. One of the things that I really like about it, though, is that you get a global voice from Humanising Language Teaching that you don't always get from other journals. So, for example, in the most recent edition, we have somebody writing from Oman, somebody from Vietnam. I have to say, to give the Vietnamese their credit, they are a big presence in ELT and EFL, and I've spoken to several academics from Vietnam. They really know their stuff, and they are good writers. They are really good at putting together these academic articles. I'm actually hoping to produce some research alongside or co-authored by or with a researcher from Vietnam. Now, I'm saying that because I don't have very much experience beyond Poland at the moment, but this is an area of the world of English teaching that I really want to explore. And this is my way of doing it, to get these ideas from people who are writing from all around the world. And speaking of writing from all around the world, we also have the Asian EFL Journal, which is a very well constructed journal with lots of open access documents. And then a little bit closer to home, we have Oxford Academics ELT Journal. The ELT Journal, though it is a paid journal, they do have their editor's choice section. And every issue, the editor selects one paper for free open access so that you can have a look at something written for this journal. And this is a peer-reviewed journal. just like the Asia Journal, but unlike IH Journal and HLT, which are not peer reviewed. So this is a peer reviewed journal. So if ever you get your work produced here, of course, that's going to go into your CV and will really look very good. So we've got lots of free articles here. These are all open access. There are lots of things that would be interesting. And this one in particular, for example, incorporating global Englishes into the ELT classroom. Now, that's relevant to everything else I've said so far. Okay, so we've so far looked at reading, and you might think, why did I make all of these notes on a piece of paper? That's not a journal. What am I going to do with that? It's too much for a book review, isn't it? Well, it certainly is. So what I've started doing recently is I've started producing short articles. And this article about the book here, I've called The Wisdom of Michael Lewis. I went through this book on the English verb, which is all about looking for semantic meaning in different verb forms in English and moving away from this idea of rules and exceptions to better rules that don't have those exceptions. And they will it's a great book for that. However, what I was more concerned in was the application of that idea to teaching. So I made all of my notes and I wrote this short piece. It takes about 5-10 minutes to read. And as you can see, it's full of quotes from the book. Now, this does look very nice, I think. It's visually appealing, but I didn't program it. I didn't design it in HTML. No, I used this website, which is called Medium. Medium.com. It's completely free. I think it's made by the same people that made Twitter, but I think it's branched off since then. So this is a really good platform for your writing. It is extremely easy to put together short articles with photos if you've got them. You can simply select the text that you've got and change it. So if I go, for example, here, if I click edit story, I can show you just how simple the interface is. So it tells me this is going to be the title. I've got this picture, and if I don't want it across the whole page, I can make it a little inset, or I could have it like this, or I could have it like this. I want it like this. I quite like the way it looks that way. I can add a caption. I didn't do that previously. Maybe I should. What should I say? The English Verb by Michael Lewis. There we go. Now I have a caption. Now within the text itself, if I select some text, a little contextual menu comes up and I can do what I need to do here. I can make it bold, italic, or have a link going somewhere. So it is very, very simple. I'll save and publish that. And there we go. So that's what I've done with this. And I'll be able to come back to this in years to come and see what I thought about this book. So that's really a very powerful way of getting your ideas and then sending them out again. Now, to just very quickly address a couple of the comments that have come up. The PowerPoint slides that I'm using have been sent to the organizers of this talk. There was also going to be, I think, a video made to be put onto YouTube. So there will be a chance for you to see all of this again. And the links, of course, I will make available at the end of this talk. This tool is called Medium, like small, medium, large, medium.com. And once again, it is completely free. I'm trying to show as many things now that are free as possible, because I know as a teacher myself, money is not really something that we have a lot of, and it's certainly not something that we can just throw around at the things that we want to do. Okay, before I move away from reading, I would like to make an invitation to you. Recently, I started a new Facebook group. And this Facebook group is completely free to join. I've sent a link in the chat to you, and it is called EFL Academic Reading. The idea is very simple. I will post open access articles into the group. For example, we started looking at Jason Anderson's 2017 article, A Potted History of PPP, which, as you know, is present, practice, and produce. And then we have some responses to it. We have questions that will direct our attention to different aspects of that article. and we talk about it together. It is an open forum for people to come together and share their ideas completely freely. And it's a great little networking tool as well, because you'll see the other members, you'll be able to come on board and say hello and start finding that you've got a whole community at your fingertips. I love the fact that we teachers are so community minded. It gives me real feeling of delight. Okay, so moving on then, after we've done reading, the next thing that we could start thinking about is action research. There have been some very good videos on this Teacher Development Webinars YouTube channel recently about action research, and they gave me some ideas. I've had some other ideas recently. With action research, this is one of the best ways that you can build your personal development as a teacher. Start with something you've read and something that you find particularly interesting. I'm going to give you an example of this in a moment. Start brainstorming ways to develop from your basic idea. So you have that kernel of an idea and you start to think, okay, I'm going to build a project around this. What could I do as a project that would really build my knowledge of this area, but also see how it works in practice? Decide what you want to measure and how you're going to measure it. These are very key things to decide right at the start. You can't really do action research without first thinking how you're going to do the practical aspects of it. And importantly, decide on the start and end points of your work. You need to know when you're going to begin your little piece of research and when it's okay to say, all right, that's enough for now. Okay, so again, I'm going to show you something from my own experience. And I want to start by talking about this guy. This guy is Jason Anderson. He's a teacher educator, author and researcher. You might recognize the name from the Facebook group just now. Yes, I chose one of his articles to start the group off. And one of his blog posts recently, again, links will be forthcoming, was about this idea of reading aloud. I read it and I thought, this is interesting, reading aloud. I remember reading aloud from my school days. I hated it. We used to do Charles Dickens. I think it was Great Expectations with Philip Pirin, or Pip, as he was called. And we would sit there with our books open in front of us, and the teacher would say, okay, Walker, next paragraph. So I would read dutifully, not really taking in what I was reading, but I'd read it. And then he'd say, okay, McAllister, next paragraph. And I'd go, phew, okay, I'm finished, I'm done. So then I'd just listen. But it is a legitimate practice if it's done well in mainstream education. The question is, and this is a question that Jason Anderson was considering, is it also an appropriate practice in ELT or EFL? Good question. Very good question. So I read this and I read the links that he included and started thinking, I am really interested in this. I think I'm so interested in this that I could keep my interest going for at least a month, maybe longer. I ought to do something with this. And that's when my thoughts returned to the class I mentioned at the start of this talk. That group of teenagers, there were 6 or 7 of them that came to the lessons, and they didn't turn on their camera, they didn't turn on the microphone, and I never heard them. I never heard their voices. And that was a bit sad, really. I really wanted to hear them. I wanted them to tell me something, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. They were a bit too shy. They're also quite low level, maybe intimidated too much to use the language. So I thought to myself, well, what can I do? I could try this with them. Maybe this would work. So in one of the lessons, I decided this is going to be the start point of my research, this lesson. So I turned on record in Zoom and I said to the students, okay, listen to this short text. And I read them a paragraph from the book. And I said, okay, now it's your turn. I want you to read it to me. So each of the students read it to me in turn. And as I was recording it, I could then go back later, play it back, and I counted up all of the pronunciation errors that I heard. And I had to categorize those errors, really. I started thinking to myself, well, what can I call those different errors? What counts as an error for this level? So, for example, if they say the wrong word, one of the words that came up was pronunciation, ironically, and they said pronounce. Okay, well, that's definitely wrong. That counts as a mistake. But then I also thought, well, one of my students has a heavily inflected Polish accent that's applied to the English that they're saying. So instead of saying hour for 60 minutes, they were saying hour, like this, with the rolled R. I thought, okay, well, that is not ideal. It's maybe not a mistake exactly. I still know the word, but it is something that we could work on. So I went through and I started quantifying. I wanted to capture the information. And I thought to myself, okay, so I've got the start point. This is what they're like without any practice. So what if I start giving them some practice and then I test them again? How am I going to measure this as I go along? What are my criteria as I go along? So I started to put everything together in a spreadsheet, which you can see just here. It's a very basic spreadsheet. It's not very pretty to look at, but I've got the names of my students down just here, anonymized for this session, of course. And on the first test, I've got the percentage of words that they spoke or pronounced incorrectly. As you can see, one of the students managed to incorrectly pronounce a quarter of all the words in the text. O at the bottom here was a new student who didn't arrive until we'd already started all of this practice. So I started thinking, okay, what am I going to do with this? I've got the basic framework. Right, okay, so I'm going to give them a bit of practice. I will record myself saying or reading aloud part of the text. I'll send my students the recording. I'll send the students into a breakout room with the instruction to practice reading so that they can copy my model. And then I will ask them to record what they have done. And that's what all of these links are at the bottom just here that you can see. So all of these links here are recordings that my students made.
My father was talking about languages. He said speaking French well, but he doesn't. I've heard him speaking French. He tries to speaking very quickly and
Okay, so I've got that recording. I've got all of these recordings. By the way, this is Vocaroo. If you want to make easy, simple recordings of things, Vocaroo is great. It is free. And it's very, very simple. It's a very simple interface. You just have the record button, click and go. It's very, very simple to use. So I have all of these recordings and I'm tracing my students' abilities. I haven't graded practices 4 and 5 yet, but as you can see from my plan, we are nearing the end. In fact, all we have left is the final reading, which we're going to be doing tomorrow. And I'm going to then produce a chart to show my students of where they started, how they progressed over the 4 weeks that we've been practicing reading aloud for pronunciation, and then I'll show them where they are now. I'm also going to send them their links back. So that opening link, which shows their first practice, they'll listen to that, and then they're going to listen to their final reading again, and I'm going to get them to compare so that they can see if they have made any progress. So this is my little bit of action research. And what I'm hoping to do, because of cross-referencing all of the links that were offered in this article by Jason Anderson, I would like to write this up as an academic journal article, which I will hopefully send to the ELT journal. I don't know if I'm good enough, though, to be honest. They have very high standards. We'll see what happens. If I can't get my work published here, then I might well send it to Humanising Language Teaching, or for me, because I work within the IH network, the IH Journal. There are different outlets for my work, just as there are different outlets for your work. So if you do this sort of action research, then you can start sending the write-ups to different people, to different places, and you can get your name out there. You can add something of real value to your CV. So, as I mentioned, there are some great ideas out there. Just on teacher development webinars in the last couple of months, there have been a couple of talks that are fascinating, well worth watching at your leisure. But if you watch them, keep a piece of paper handy, keep a pen or a pencil handy, and make some actual notes about what's going on in that video. Don't watch passively, just as you shouldn't read passively. Make sure to actually engage with the material that's there. And once you've finished your action research, write it up and find an audience for it. And speaking of which, one ready-made audience would be conferences. A great way to get into conferences is as a speaker. There are lots of calls for speakers that are posted out on Facebook and on other websites, and you can find them all over. We are living through a very difficult period in global history with the pandemic that has affected all of us to a greater or lesser extent, but there have been positives. And one of the positives for me has been the wider availability of conferences. Everything's moved online. So, for example, I'm just going to humble brag very briefly. I hope you forgive me for this, but this is my personal website, which is closelyobserved.com, and I have my CV here. And this is my speaker history at conferences. Now, half of those, pretty much, have come in just the last couple of months, simply because all of these conferences moved online. Now, for me, personally, to have visited, well, EFL Talks was always online. I8FL Poland would have been somewhere in the north. It was supposed to be in Łódź, which is difficult for me to reach. International House Kiev had a conference online. I wouldn't have been able to get to Kiev. International House Torun had a conference online. It was fantastic. It was very well run. Glenn Standish was involved in that. He was at the heart of all of that. Glenn Standish, you might remember from the talk here yesterday. But getting to Torun for me is difficult as well. It's a 7 or 8 hour journey on the bus. I8FL Hungary had their conference in Budapest, but moved it online because of the pandemic. Bielsko-Biała is where I live, and I organized this conference, and that's slightly different. And then this SA-TEFL was in Scotland. So the chances of me getting there were almost zero anyway. So all of these conferences moving online really open a lot of possibilities for all of us. So if you've got that bit of action research, or you've found something out from your reading, you can then prepare yourself for speaking at a conference. You could always run it yourself, of course. So take your research and develop a talk around it. Now, this is similar to the point I raised earlier about reading, that you should find as many different sources of reading as possible, because that way you have that central idea and you approach it from different directions. The same is true with your own ideas and the work that you do yourself. You have that idea, you know what it's about, and you produce an article. Great, that's the written genre. But what about a talk, something a little bit more interactive, something that can catch people's attention? That's another way to access the idea and expand upon it. And it helps to centralize all of those different components of the ideas. It will help you take your knowledge further because you're coming at it from a different direction. So preparing a conference talk, even if you never give it at a conference, maybe you just give it at your own school. I've done that a lot. I've done lots of input sessions and workshops at my own school so that I could spread these ideas that I'd had, and I can test them. I can see if the people in my audience actually get the idea, and if they do, great, I get it then. If they don't, if they look at me with this kind of puzzled expression, like, what are you talking about? Maybe I need to go back and re-examine what I know myself. So it's this idea of adaptation that's central. You can also network. That's one of the great things about face-to-face conferences. Online conferences, a little bit less so. The networking at online conferences doesn't seem to happen much during the conference itself, but it does exist, and it often comes around the conference. So for example, I sent the link earlier to the Facebook group, which again, I would invite you to join. This Facebook group is a great source of networking potential. You can get people meeting online, talking to each other online. These things happen because of conferences. They don't happen so much at online conferences. Face-to-face is better in that regard, but it still happens. You can also, of course, find new teaching ideas. And this is one of the great things about online conferences, that everything is recorded. A lot of the time, everything is put online. So you would then get all of these things to review and watch at your leisure. Oh, wow. Somebody says in the chat that they are researching early child education at home by mothers. That is important. That is fantastic. Wow. Please get in touch, because I'd love to know more about that. Everybody has become a home educator here in Poland. It's actually a bad thing in some respects, because sometimes the parents, because they're not trained teachers or pedagogues, they perhaps don't actually know what the teacher is doing or why, and they start to interfere a little bit. But there are some good examples. I'd really like to know more about that research. Keep it up and send me something, please. Okay, so from conferences, we move on to another area of teacher development that I believe passionately in, and that is observations. A lot of people grimace when they hear the word observation, and to be honest, I still do a little bit. I'm a little bit wary of formal observations. As I mentioned at the start or in the introduction, I've been a teacher for about 15 years, but I still have to go through formal observations every year. My director of studies comes to watch a lesson. I have to prepare a full lesson plan, give that to her. Then we have a meeting afterwards to discuss my performance in the lesson. I don't get anything much from that. It's just too stressful, and I don't like it very much. So I don't think that formal observations, where there is some sort of assessment criterion, those don't necessarily work very well to help with teacher development. However, if you remove the formal aspect, observations can be very useful. And there are two approaches. The first is to watch other teachers. The second, of course, is to be watched. I recommend you do more of the former and some of the latter, but not too much, because it can just be too stressful and it can affect your teaching. But watching other teachers at work is great, as long as you don't then pretend that you're their boss and start giving them all of this sort of feedback. Peer observations really are the best place to start. You find another teacher and you decide, maybe with them, you can talk to them about it, but you can decide which aspect of teaching you want to investigate. So perhaps you think, my instructions for tasks seem too complicated. I talk and talk and talk. I give the same instruction 3 times in 3 different ways, and then my students end up going off task almost immediately because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. I've overcomplicated the instructions. So, okay, let's talk to the teacher about it. Decide that you want to see that. You go and see the teacher. Prepare a list of questions to ask yourself as you observe. Just like with the reading, just like with the action research, think about it. Just like with watching videos, think about it. What is it exactly that you want to investigate, and how are you going to do it? Don't be a passive participant. I've seen that happen too often. I've seen too many people come to observe my lessons because it's kind of mandated by my school. You have to do 2 or 3 peer observations every year. And they come and they sit at the back, and I can see them on their phone. They're checking their internet, and there you go. watch as many teachers as possible, but following the same set of questions. So this is a little bit like, well, for all the other things that we've talked about, when you read widely to bring in different ideas for the same thing. When you write up your ideas, you prepare an article, but you prepare a conference talk or a workshop at your school. You're bringing this idea and taking it in different directions. So seeing different teachers and watching for the same sort of things each time, this will give you different aspects and different approaches, and you'll be able to get a bigger picture. One of the dangers with peer observations is that if you only watch one teacher, you might start to think that what you've seen is the only way to do something, when in fact it is just that teacher's way to do something. You need more input, you need more evidence of things. So if you don't want to watch, you could prepare the questions and ask somebody else to watch you. So like I mentioned before, keep these observations as friendly as possible. Don't make them into formal assessment observations, because that's just too stressful and it puts people into the wrong kind of frame of mind in their teaching. Now, when it comes to observations, one of the problems that most people have is that they have a clash of timetables. I would love to observe a lot of teachers, but I work all the time when my school is open. We tend to teach from 3 until 9, more or less, in the evenings here in Poland. And I work all of those hours every day. So I can't go and see another teacher teach. But all of our lessons happen online. Remember that Zoom comes with a record option. As long as you've got space on your hard drive, you can then save things there. And if you have a Gmail account, you've got a YouTube account as well. And that means that you can upload that video. But don't worry, you can keep it unlisted. And that way it won't show up in search terms in YouTube. So other people are not going to find this video accidentally. You're not going to suddenly unleash a video of your students or your teaching into the whole world for everyone to see. It will only be the people who have the link who can see the video. So privacy can be maintained. So what you can do then is, if you want somebody to watch your lesson, record it in Zoom if you're teaching online, put it into YouTube unlisted, share the link with a teacher and ask them to watch, or do the same thing. If you'd like to see an example of that sort of thing, then have a look at my channel. I will share the link first of all. So this is my teaching channel. I have a couple of different channels on YouTube, one for building your English, but this one is about teaching itself. And there are several videos that I made during my school's language awareness course. So these are short lessons, effectively. So there's one here. You can tell which ones they are because they're so long. But you can watch the videos and use this as your observed lesson. You can observe my teaching. You can see what works and what doesn't online. You can see how breakout rooms are managed and how I, as the teacher, move between them during these sessions. I'm very proud, actually, that one of these videos, the one just here with 360 views, the reason it has so many views is that it was picked up by a school in Austria that did basic teacher training courses, the CELTA. And they used this as one of their model lessons so that teachers or trainee teachers could observe a teacher at work and they could do their observation tasks. This was, of course, necessary because of the lockdown, and they didn't have teachers available to watch. You couldn't bring students into the school. Everything was online. So if you want lessons to observe, these are teacher training sessions more than typical lessons, but it's a start. And YouTube is full of these sort of lessons where you can go in and that can be your peer observation. You, again, have those questions ready and you watch the video to see how the teachers do it. Okay, and that brings me to my concluding area to consider, and this is the courses and qualifications that would be open to you as professionals in this industry. I didn't really start taking my development much further until I'd already been a teacher for about 7 or 8 years. Those first years, I think I was still kind of playing with the idea of being a teacher. I was still not convinced myself that I wanted to remain in this field for very long. But once I started taking things more seriously, getting extra qualifications seemed like a necessary next step. So the couple of options that I can think of that I've done myself, there are many other options, but these are the ones that I've done. International House, the company that I work for, have a very good teacher training institute. I learned a huge amount on some of their courses, and I'll show you their site in a moment. I also did a master's degree in applied linguistics and TESOL, which I found very rewarding, but it is very expensive. These things are worth doing if you're very serious about the industry, and there will be options for you in your local area to do these sort of courses. So let me very quickly show you some of these websites then. For the teacher training, with International House, this is their online teacher training institute. They have a lot of different courses that focus on different areas. I've done the certificate in teaching young learners and teenagers. That was very useful. We did that at my school. I haven't done the certificate in teaching very young learners because I don't teach very young learners. My youngest students at the moment are 8 years old. I've tried teaching younger students, but I don't really feel that I don't think I have the energy for it. I think you need to be a real superstar. So if there are any people in the audience who teach that sort of age group, well done. Well done. Very difficult. I've done the certificate in online tutoring and in, where have we got? Yes, the teacher trainer certificate. My experiences with the International House Teacher Training Center, their institute, have only been positive. The courses themselves are relatively expensive if you're outside of the IH network, unfortunately. So it might not be something that is completely worthwhile. If you are looking at getting into the IH network, or if you're in it at the moment, then the prices are greatly reduced. All I can say is that the courses have very good value. They do offer a lot. Now with the master's course that I did, the first thing I did was actually a FutureLearn course. Now FutureLearn, I think some of you might know about already. FutureLearn is a MOOC provider. So this is the massively open online courses. These are university courses that are offered for free. They don't have a testing component, so it's not really like you're going to pass or fail the course, but there are lots of courses available like this. Leicester University, which is where I studied, offer an introduction to applied linguistics and TESOL, which is like an introduction to their distance learning course. Now, again, it's a very expensive course. Fortunately, the international fee is exactly the same as the UK fee at the moment. I thought it was worth doing, so I saved up a lot. And when I say I saved up a lot, what I mean is I went to my mum, who still somehow had some savings, and I said, Mum, could I borrow a bit of money? It's really been worth it, definitely. I have extra letters to put after my name, and it has opened the door to a lot. There are so many possibilities for me now that I've got this master's. A PhD would be the next option, I suppose, if I want to go more into academia. And I'm quite happy to think about that, actually, because there's so much that can be done in academia, and it would just be different to what I'm doing right now. And I suppose that could be the closing message here, is to look for new things and look for different things, things that you would like to do and you would like to experiment with in the future. In terms of to very quickly address the question here, the FutureLearn courses are not really accredited because there's no sort of examination system. I don't think courses can be accredited if you only have to attend to pass. So it's good in terms of the knowledge that you gain. Future Learn courses are pretty good. They're a great way to network with other people as well. But you're not really, I don't see the benefits myself. They say you can get extra benefits from $74 for a course. I don't see the benefits myself. I have paid for a few courses just to see what those benefits would be. You have to decide for yourselves, but for me, it wasn't really worth it. And at that point, I shall draw my talk to a close. That was a catalogue of different teacher development opportunities for you to pursue. And does anyone have any questions?
Thanks very much, Christopher, for sharing, wonderful resources and all, these components which included in a teacher development catalog. So I think, we are out of the time, but if we can have some of the questions, that will be great. Any questions from the audience? I'm monitoring chat box and you can do this. So, and about these, virtual opportunities, we put a lot of them free resources on teacher development webinars, Facebook group as well. So there are massive open online courses that can be taken freely, and at the end of these opportunities you get a badge, a certificate. Some of them provide badge, some of them provide the certificate. And I share most of the opportunities that are free, because I know in the context of Pakistan, teachers are less interested in opportunities that cost them, so yeah.
I'm the same way in that regard. I'd always prefer a free opportunity.
Yeah, so I don't see any questions. And this recording will be made available on Teacher Development Webinars YouTube channel later this evening. You can join our social media channels for future webinars, and please follow us on our social media channels. And our Twitter handle is TD Webinars. So yeah, we are available on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere. So on this note, let me remind you that COVID-19 cases have been on rise in Pakistan. So please practice physical distancing, keep wearing masks, and don't forget social solidarity. Be safe, everyone. I'll take your leave. Take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for having me. Lovely to see so many people from around the world. Have a great day.
Christopher,